Billy's absolutely right. My dad, dead now, he fought in the Second World War. His generation were passionate pro-Europeans because they knew it had brought us an unprecedented period of peace and prosperity in Europe. And I think that's a lesson that you know very well. So use that argument with your elders.
What my parents said.
If economists could tell you the future, there'd only ever need to be one of them. And everything would work perfectly. So don't believe these figures that are bandied around. There's a new one out today, Tim tells me. Everybody's going to be, we're all going to be robbed of 550 quid if we vote out.
11 quid a week.
Oh, great. Wow, great. It's all nonsense. All of these figures are nonsense because we're all looking into the future. And nobody knows what happens in the future.
Michael Gove was on the Today programme this morning assuring us that everything will be okay because German car manufacturers want to sell us our cars. This is like relying on Wales to beat Russia in order to qualify for the next round. It's not, you know, if we're having to rely on German car manufacturers, that is definitely not taking back control. That's giving away control.
I can see good in belonging to the EU, but I can also see cracks. I can see cracks happening now with unemployment, like the lady said at the back, the unemployment, the migration, the mass migration that's happening in Europe. Europe's got problems.
And the problem with the EU, in spite of what Molly says, it's not democratic. It's got the commissioners are not elected and they instigate laws. Yeah. And that is simply not democratic. We have democracies when you can vote for people like Ben.
And indeed, Billy said earlier on, the EU is in crisis, and it is in economic crisis. It is the slowest growing slowest growing continent other than Antarctica. It is dramatically losing its influence in trade around the world. And one of the reasons for that is because it insists on retaining its position as a customs union. It's not going, it's refusing to become, like the rest of the world, a free trading organisation.
Let's bring it back to Exeter. Why do more than 80% of employers in Exeter, surveyed by our local Chamber of Commerce, want to stay in the European Union? Why does our biggest employer, Exeter University, say it would be a disaster for us economically if we left the European Union? Because they care about jobs and employment and prosperity in our city and in our county. Every single independent economic forecaster. You've had Soros today, we've had the Bank of England, we've had our own, the Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies, all saying it would be a disaster if we left the European Union. This is about jobs and it's about our young people's future.
Look at this front page. Look at this front page. This is so distorted and deceptive. We've been having this day after day. We've been having the Daily Express reduced to 20p for the duration of the campaign, so more and more people are reading this. We're from Europe, let
Have
us
some
in.
respect, sir.
We're from Europe, let us in. It's completely untrue. The tape which the BBC correspondent listened to said we're from Iraq. These people are refugees. If they had come from Europe, they'd be in a truck, would they? Because they'd have perfect right to come here. They've come from Iraq, they've come as refugees. Whose fault is that? Why is there a war in Iraq that people are fleeing from? We used to be a country that took in refugees. We used to be a country that had compassion. We are being turned into a country of division and hate. We have to stand up.
That if we actually voted to remain in, would there be further moves that we actually don't have a choice about or get voted out? And I think that more than anything else, what my friends tell me, that's what they're worried about. They're worried that tomorrow, after the vote, we will actually start becoming more involved in the Eurozone because there's talk of us here in Britain actually ending up with the Euro.
The idea that Europe is something that is done to us, that we don't have influence and a role in Europe. And all these scares, the scares from the Leave campaign, every single country in Europe has a veto on new members. So Turkey is not joining the European Union.
Why would 2 billion?
Ever, because if we didn't veto it, France or Germany certainly would, and so would certainly Cyprus or Greece, if we know anything about it. So this is let's have no more of these lies and scaremongering about the Union.
In short, it would be very good for the countries of the EU if its existing structure collapsed and it became a common market.
It would lead to the breakup of the United Kingdom, and that is something I care deeply about because I have absolutely no doubt that if we leave, if the UK votes to leave, but the Scots vote to remain, that they will not take kindly to that. It'll give Nicola Sturgeon exactly the excuse she needs for another referendum, and she would win it. I also have real concern, as do our former Prime Ministers, about the peace process and what would happen in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is likely to vote overwhelmingly to stay, and if Northern Ireland is also dragged out of the European Union, the consequences for the peace process there don't bear thinking about.
To take a chance for people who genuinely believe and love the United Kingdom, love Great Britain, to genuinely cast a vote that would perhaps destroy the United Kingdom, I find it very difficult to understand.
Ridiculous. We buy 95% of our wine outside the EU. We're the biggest buyer of wine in pubs in the UK. And we buy a lot of our food from outside the EU. Both those things are subject to tariffs. They'll drop. Prices in our pubs will go down if we leave the EU.
But the reality is 12% of our GDP is for exports to the European Union. It's only 3% of their GDP. So you can see that in the terms of trade discussion, they have 4 times the power we do, and we will be weak in those terms of trade, and that will not work for our businesses. Another example is investment. If we leave the European Union, why should companies like Honda in Swindon, which is part of the area I represent, why would they continue to invest in our country, which is now outside the single market? They want to produce inside the single market to those standards so they can sell across Europe. So there's no question that jobs will be lost there.
I do not want, for the benefit of being able to say we are big, to give away the democracy that our forefathers built and the civil rights that we built in this country, just to be part of a great big state called Europe that wants to throw its weight around in the world. We are a big enough state as we are, we're a big enough economy as we are, and we are an extraordinarily sophisticated, democratic and humane country, and I want us to stay that way.
And this constant refrain that the European Union is undemocratic and that decisions are taken by unelected bureaucrats. Incidentally, these bureaucrats are commissioners appointed by the individual member state governments. But the decision-making body in the European Union is the individual member states' governments. It's not the Parliament, if Molly will forgive me for a moment. It's not the Commission. It's the democratic elected governments of each of our countries. That's where the sovereignty lies in the European Union. So let's get over this, yet another lie about there being no democracy.
You start saying we're lying every 5 seconds.
And the first and most important thing to say is it is not them and us. We are part of Europe as well. I think this is partly where the division comes between older people and younger people, because younger people in our society completely understand themselves as Europeans. You know, they travel freely across our continent to study and to work. It's a huge opportunity if you're a young person, and I think that's something that we would be very sorry to lose.
When this is over, we have to go back, we have to look back on things like the Breaking Point poster. We have to ask ourselves how we ever allowed the debate to become so uncivil, so angry.
That David Cameron came back with at the beginning of the year has not yet been ratified by the European Parliament.
None of
And
his
indeed,
deals get
if
ratified.
we vote to remain in the EU, it will have to go to the European Parliament to be ratified. And I have to say, pretty much everybody from the European Parliament that has expressed a view on this has said, you've got no chance, folks. So perhaps we will see European democracy in action at that point. But I hope, because I'm pretty sure we'll vote to leave on Thursday.
Well, regrettably, we could talk about this all day, I'm sure. Regrettably, we're out of time. I'd like to say that on Thursday, the Express and Echo will be live blogging from all counts, and we'll be giving the latest results from each district as they come in, and then the South West results that can be followed on Express and Echo.